Welcome to the Eurostep Brit podcast.
Under 10 seconds. Game's going to be decided here. Harrell spots up. Doesn't go. Put back is good! Roberto Gallina with a second chance opportunity. Aris Lee. Per Gunther for three. Got it. Per Gunther, 3 punta. Holland. Pull up three, no good. Orcus, the offensive board. He turns around and shoots. Got it at the buzzer!
Hello, and welcome to episode 31 of the Eurostep Brit podcast. We'll call this one 100% Hustle. Our guest is Kelvin Robinson, who only spent 4 seasons playing in the UK, but became a fan favourite at the teams he suited up for because of the way he played the game. In this episode, we'll not only look back at Kelvin's days with the Royals, Lions and Tigers, but also dive into his time playing in South Africa, France, and a short spell playing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. From New Jersey to Europe and Africa, and then back to New Jersey, it was great to catch up with Kelvin and look back over that career. So, without further ado, let's get to it.
Kelvin, well, welcome to the podcast. It's absolutely fantastic to get you on. I was going through an archive when I worked on Tip Off magazine years ago, and I had some of your pictures when you played for the Tigers. And I posted one on Instagram a little while back. It was nice to see all the people that remembered you from your time over here in the UK. You know, because you had an impact. For me, you're a great player. I loved, you could score, but one of the things I loved about your game was the defense and the rebounding as well. You know, you're a monster on the boards. I remember one season that Milton, Keynes, or Hemel as it was, we'll get into in a moment. But I just want to take you back. I like to try and get everybody's basketball journey. Now, you're from Newark, New Jersey. Is that right?
Newark, New Jersey. Yep. Mm-hmm.
How did basketball first become a part of your life?
So it was just Newark, New Jersey is like one of those. It's a typical ghetto inner city places in America. So me, honestly, my basketball journey just started trying to stay out of trouble, doing things my friends used to do on the street. It was something you just had a ball and we had courts around, so we would just go play. And it just became a love of mine, just playing basketball. I never played anything organized. It was basically just street ball for the most part.
So how did you go from there to the organized game to college?
So what happened was, like I said, I started playing basketball in elementary school, which was like, I'll say around, for us here, like 7th grade, probably around 11, 12 years old. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just really competitive. So I will play anything on the streets. You know, we would play football, baseball, and I just always wanted to be better than my friends. So I was always more athletic than most people around. And then that lended itself well for basketball. So just did that. And then went to high school, didn't play. I went to a high school in Newark, New Jersey called Malcolm X Shabazz. At my time at the high school, 2 guys that's very good friends of mine now, we had 2 NBA players. Anthony Avant was a couple years ahead of me, and Eric Williams. Anthony Avant played for Seton Hall, and then he played in the NBA for the Milwaukee Bucks, Orlando Magic for 6 or 7 years. And then Eric Williams graduated in my class. He played for the Celtics, Denver Nuggets, and things of that nature. So I was always around good, talented people, but I never played organized, but these were just the guys that I played with. And then I was working. I've been working because, like, with my family, I had to work if I wanted nice sneakers and stuff like that. I didn't want to get into doing anything that was, against the law. So I started working at a very young age at 13 years old, like just sweeping up at like a health food store, sporting goods store, going after school, sweeping up. And like that, by the time I left there, I was managing the store. But that being said, if I wasn't in school or working, I was on a basketball court playing tournaments and traveling with my friends and just playing in street tournaments and stuff like that. And a guy saw me. Actually, I had graduated from high school. I worked for a full year after graduating from high school, and my sister was dating a guy who played college basketball. And he was starting to go into the tournaments with me, and he would say, "Man, you too good not to go somewhere. I'm going to take you and introduce you to this coach at the junior college, the local junior college in Newark, Essex County College." I introduced you to the coach. The coach was a legendary coach, NBA player. His name is Cleo Hill. He passed away a couple years ago. Excellent basketball mind. And he said, if the coach likes you, he'll give you an opportunity to play at the junior college. So I went, and the coach saw me. He said, you can play, but you have no idea how to play. You can play. You got some raw talent. So if you come every day, this was in the summertime. I'll never forget it. He said, if you come every day before work, from 7 to like 8:30, because I started work about 9 o'clock, and I work out with you. If everything works out by the end of the summer, everything goes well, I'll give you a shot with the team. And I did that religiously. And I went to Essex County College for the first year. It was very rough because, honestly, like I said, I never played no AAU, no nothing, So all I knew was street basketball. I'll never forget a crazy story that I'll never forget. I was so embarrassed. So one of our first practices, we were working on trap and defenses. And in the street, like, you just got to get the ball to where it goes. You could go behind your back. You could bounce it off somebody's head. As long as you get to the other guy. These guys put a trap on me so hard, man. I'm at like the half court line. They caught me right like in the half court was like I couldn't go back anymore and I couldn't go forward. And I kind of like just bowled the ball over to the next guy. Like I just rolled it over to one of my teammates and our coach was like, he had a mouth that you wouldn't believe. He cursed me out so bad, like, yo, that's so stupid. But that's the type of level of basketball that I didn't have, basketball IQ. I was just athletic. So after that, first year was rough. The second year I got it because I pick up things pretty fast. By the end of the first year, I was playing consistently. And the second year I got it, and I was able to go from junior college. I was one of the first guys in probably 20 years from that junior college that went from there to Division I basketball. So in my second year in junior college, I averaged probably 15 points, maybe 14 rebounds, and like 8 or 9 block shots. And then that was, after that, it was the rest is history.
Just for the sake of our listeners, can you explain the difference between, it's called JUCO, don't you? Call it JUCO?
Mm-hmm.
And then, say, Division I school. Can you explain the differences between the two?
Yep. So JUCO is a 2-year school. Mm-hmm. And that's let's take basketball out of it. JUCO is basically like it's a community, it's an opportunity for people who don't either have the grades or they don't have the money to pay for directly for full university. It's something where the municipalities and, it's government supported. You can go there, take some classes. If you don't have the grades, you can take college classes, get your GPA up, and then you can transfer some of the credits over to a 4-year school, which is more established. And JUCOs offer a lot of associate degrees, so you can get 2-year degrees there. You can't get a 4-year degree there, but you can get 2-year degrees there. But with basketball and with sports, if you don't have the grades, it's a good way to get your grades up. Or if you do have the grades, like myself, because I had great grades in high school and stuff like that, but I just never had exposure. Nobody knew I could play basketball. But it gave me a way to get exposure. So that's the difference.
So you get this opportunity. Was it Buffalo you went to? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, University of Buffalo. I had. It's a.
Did you get a scholarship to go there?
I had so many scholarship offers, man. It was like my mother got. My family, we wasn't used to this. Like, it's like out of the blue for us. Nobody expected this. I'm working for a full year. It got to the point my phone is ringing so much, and this is the early 90s. It wasn't like today, emails and stuff. The phone's just ringing all times all night. My mother said eventually we're going to put our name, all the names in the hat. We just want to pick one because I can't take this anymore, And it came down to Buffalo and, believe it or not, Wake Forest. And if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have went to Wake Forest. Buffalo was a great experience for me. The coach at Buffalo is the reason I went there, and he's still a mentor to me to this day. A guy that I knew that was one of my mentors here that ran a lot of training camps, and he ran some scouting camps and stuff. He was like, coach came from Boston College. He's starting a new program, and he's like, I think you guys will hit it off. And we did. So that's why I went to Buffalo. But it was tough between Buffalo and Wake Forest. The coach in Wake Forest calls me. He says, believe this or not, we have a guy coming from St. Croix. He's a freshman. And, we want you guys to be roommates because, you're going to be a junior. He's going to be a freshman. You can show him the ropes. And I think it'll be good for both of you guys. You got similar personalities. Not knowing then what I know now, that the guy was Tim Duncan. So Tim Duncan would have been my roommate at Wake Forest.
When you said Wake Forest, you I'm thinking there's only one person that could be.
Yeah. So that's a funny story.
Tim Duncan, could have been a Celtic. There you go.
Yep.
Still not over it. So what? So what was the experience like? Obviously, New Jersey, upstate New York, Buffalo. In terms of states, it's not too far, but obviously from
Hmm.
our perspective, it's quite away. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was a big transition because like New Jersey and like coming from Newark, it's like it's very like the people in the UK will probably associate with like New York City or Harlem and stuff like that. That type of mentality. Everybody's doing their own thing and very little smiles. You walk past somebody in the morning, people don't really say hello. Everybody's doing their own thing. You get to Buffalo, first of all, it's a beautiful campus. It's 60,000 people like on the campus. Something I never expected. It's a beautiful campus. The school has everything that you can imagine. You can live on the campus probably for 5 years without leaving the campus, and you can go bowling, go to the movies, rent, boats, whatever you want to do. Like it's like unbelievable. So to me, it was like a culture shock because I'm coming from an inner city. I'd never been on a plane until I went to Buffalo, like for my recruiting visit and things of that nature. But it was an eye opener because I grew up with all like basically African Americans and Latinos. That wasn't really around a lot of white people. So now I'm thrust into this university where the majority are white people, and then we're the minorities. So it was actually a great learning experience for me, and it helped me open my mind a lot, and it just helped me be able to deal with people differently and to appreciate people for who they are.
You mentioned also, your hardship, the background of you, obviously your mother. What was it like for her, the fact that her son was playing at a D1 school on a scholarship?
Believe it or not, man, my parents all they wanted to the way that we grew up to keep me out of trouble. I played basketball from junior college, Division One, and about 12 years in Europe. My parents came to 3 games. They didn't care about basketball at all as long as I was doing something positive and not being in trouble, and that was all they cared about. They were just so proud of me the way that my life was going had nothing to do with sports.
You said there three. Did you say 3 games they came to
Three
see?
games total.
And they were they your best games when they were there? Because
Uh, I,
sometimes players go to pot when their
yeah.
parents are there. Other times they'll have the game of their life. I mean, just look at was it in the NBA? Bam Bam
Oh yeah,
Adebayo
yeah, yeah,
just recently. I think his mum was in the
yep.
stands.
Yeah, yeah. My games were they were run of the mill games. They wasn't nothing to speak of that I can remember. I was just happy that they were there and they could see what I was doing. To them too, they weren't used to traveling a lot, like other than going down south, like to visit our grandparents. So for them to be able to come up to Buffalo and then they would go to Niagara Falls and stuff, and so it was just a great experience to be able to give that. One thing that I do remember from my recruiting time, and this is how I got the scholarship, all the scholarship offers after junior college, and this was probably one of my proudest moments. Like I said, my father and them, they never went to games and stuff. So after junior college, they had this camp, this scouting camp where they have all the top junior college and high school seniors coming in New Jersey, like probably from the tri-state area. They would all come out, and this guy ran a scouting camp, and all the coaches would be there. And it's a huge camp over 2 days or one weekend. And I go to the camp, nobody knows me. The first game, they matched me up with this 6'10" guy, high school player from Jersey, supposed to be this and that. And within the first 2 minutes, I dunked on this guy like 3 or 4 times. And I could see a stream of coaches. My father was sitting way up in the bleachers. And I could just see the stream of coaches make a beeline to my father. And from that was like my proudest moment that I did something good for my family and like something that my family could be proud of. And that's when I knew like I would definitely get a scholarship.
Just the purpose of the story. This guy is 6'10". What would you have been around about this time?
Probably about 6'3", 6'3", 6'4".
I think you were listed a bit higher, taller than you were. I think when you were the BBL.
Absolutely. They always listed me higher than I was.
But do you know what? We'll get to it later on. But it honestly didn't matter, did it, when you went up
Yeah.
against some of these guys? So, and before we end and obviously bring the journey over to the UK, was there any moments or any games during your time in Buffalo that really stand out for you?
We had a
Uh,
couple big games. We had a game against Boston College one year when Boston College actually went to the Final Four that year. So, like I said, my coach from college, his name was Tim Cohane. he was the associate head coach at Boston College before he took the job at Buffalo. So he was scheduled game. He scheduled a game against Boston College. This is when they had a guy named Bill Curley that went there. He wound up getting drafted pretty high in the NBA, and he had another guy named Daniel Abrams. So they came onto campus our first year, and we were able to schedule that game because of coach. And we gave them a good run for our money, but we lost at the end of the game. But for me, it was just like like I said, you got to understand my journey. Like from 2 years ago, just playing basketball on the street, and now I'm playing against Boston College, and then we would play Miami. We played a lot of Big East teams because our coach came from the Big East, and then just traveling. So, but we had a game against Rutgers in New Jersey my second year, and nobody knew us. We kind of, before my coach took over at Buffalo, just to give you some perspective, they had been Division I for probably 4 or 5 years. The year before we got there, I think they won 3 or 4 games. Our first year with the coach and the guys he brought from JUCO and stuff, we won 10 games, but nobody really expected much of us. The second year we came in and we had Rutgers on our schedule at Rutgers, and we went down there and we beat Rutgers at Rutgers. And when we got it, this was like the first or second game of the season. They basically paid us to come there. They thought they were just going to run over us.
Yeah.
And we got on the bus to go to the hotel. I hear the announcer from Rutgers says, "Oh my God, Buffalo just beat Rutgers. I think I'm going to kill myself." So that was a game that stood out because my family and friends were there because it's a New Jersey game, and I was in New Jersey. I played summer leagues and junior college in New Jersey, and none of the New Jersey schools really recruited me. So that was a game that stood out, and I had a pretty good game.
Just for reference, I don't know the area. How far is Rutgers from Newark?
Rutgers from Newark is probably about 30-minute drive.
So you're almost home in that sense. So did you? Because I think obviously you had your own conference you played in, but you'd always play these outer conference games, wouldn't you, in college?
Yes.
Did you live for those games? Because normally, as you said, they'll be a bigger opponent, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we lived for those games because, like I said, we were able to get a lot of the big opponents just because of our coach. I'll give you a little history of my coach. To this day, like, he's one of my best friends. I talk to his sons all the time. We do business together. This guy, one of the most unique people I've ever met. He was in the military, all types of honors. Then one year, he's coaching high school basketball, he tells me, and he gets tired of coaching for his job because he's like, I got a young family now, and if every time I lose a game, I'm thinking I might get fired, I can't do this anymore. This is like the mid-'70s. He thinks to himself, how could I make money? Oh, guys are making a lot of money on Wall Street. I'll go to Wall Street. I'll make some. He just comes up with this plan. I'll go to Wall Street, make some money. Then I'll come back to coaching when I don't have to care about the money. I can just coach for the love of it. Within the mid-'70s to the mid-'80s, the guy goes to Wall Street, gets into a training program, and makes about $50 million. Starts a company, sells a company. And, so this is the type of guy that I was around and I was able to learn from. And it was just a great, great experience to be in. So he knew everybody. If we were on the West Coast, we had guys from the NBA coming to our practices. We had coaches like Rollie Massimino coming to speak to us. So he knew everybody. So he was a way to get us a lot of those big games, and that's why we did live for those types of games. And another reason I went to Buffalo, we traveled all over. He's like, man, it's too cold to be in Buffalo when it's wintertime. So we'd be in California, we went to Hawaii, we went to all over, like Florida, to all the hot states to play games. So we did live for all those games. It was a way for us to prove ourselves too. Like, a lot of the guys were like guys that were looked over on our team, guys that were good players, but that were looked over, and it was a way for us to test ourselves against these big conferences and stuff.
When you were at Buffalo, what was your thinking beyond graduation? Were you looking at carry on playing at that time, or were you maybe thinking a career away from the sport? What was in your mind back then?
The day I started playing basketball, like organized in junior college, I kind of knew that I could play beyond, because I knew athletically there was like I said, I grew up. I give you some of my friends, like, and the guys that now when I look back on it, I have a different perspective. Like, if I knew this then, I would have took basketball much seriously from Anthony Avan, Eric Williams, another friend of mine's, Eric Murdoch. Like, I grew up with guys that were like Marquise Braggs played in the NBA. Like, Rod Strickland was a point guard on my summer league team. Mark Jackson,
Wow.
I'm playing with these guys all the time, but I just didn't have any perspective, of how good these people were. So So to answer
Uh,
your question, I kind of knew once I got to Buffalo and I seen like athletically what I could do, and even in junior college, like even if I knew I wasn't the best basketball player, I knew I was probably the best athlete. So I knew I could probably play somewhere after that, after Buffalo.
well, one perspective, if you had taken it seriously, you probably never have played for Thames Valley or Hemel or anyone like that. I just, I just got to look back now. So you, you left. How did the opportunity? Because I had to check quickly. It's Hemel and Watford Royals you first came to in
Yes.
the UK, wasn't it?
Hmm.
So you've come to the end of your college career. Did you get an agent, or did an agent approach you, or did you start looking? How did it all come about?
Yeah. So my coach, one of my assistant coaches is Tony Jones. His brother played in the NBA for a long time, Bill Jones, and he's from Detroit. And so basically, like I said, people knew that I could play after, and Bill Jones hooked me up and went with his agent, and then from there they started looking out for, reaching out. So I had an agent coming out of college. Actually, I had, believe it or not, because in Buffalo, at one point, even at my height at 6'3", 6'4", I was fourth in the country in shot blocking, and I was eighth in the country in rebounding. So I had NBA scouts to come to our games, and then they realized like like the size I was after the game. These guys were taller than me, and then it was like so people I was on the radar. So that's how I knew. And then the agent picked me up. He was like, the NBA's probably not going to work out, but I can definitely get you something. So Bill Jones and Tony Jones, that family helped me out with that.
Yeah, you're listed in the BBL handbook as 6'7".
Yeah.
There you go.
If I was
Because,
6'7", I would have played in the NBA. I can guarantee you that.
but that I mean, again, we'll get onto it in a bit. But that just what makes what you did when you were here in the BBL even more remarkable. It's just the athleticism. So, what happened with Hemel? Did they reach out to, or did someone contact them? How did it all first happen?
Yeah, my first agent, his name was Bill Catapano, Frank Catapano. He actually reached out. He had some contacts in the UK. One of the first coaches I spoke to was Nick Nurse, and he was in Birmingham, I believe. And that didn't work out, but because the agent had contacts with UK coaches, and then talked to a few teams, but it worked out with Vince. Talked to Vince, and then it was seemed like it would be a good fit for me, and that's how. So my agent reached out, I guess, to his contacts in the UK, and thought that would be a good starting point for me.
Now, I was going to games back then. When you first came over and you went to play for them in their home venue, what was your first experience, if you don't mind me asking? 'Cause I do remember your first game. I've got it listed here. Your first game was against Thames Valley Tigers. You obviously later on you go on to play for. But what was it like going to play in a venue like that, which was atypical of probably a lot of the venues here at the time?
Yeah, it was it wasn't expected like what you expected coming from Division 1 and playing professional quote unquote basketball.
Yeah,
But it was like it was a great place for me to start
yeah.
because it brought the real world. Like this is what the real world in basketball. Everybody's not playing at these huge arenas. You're getting
Mm.
an opportunity to do something that you love to do. You're getting paid for it. They're paying for your housing and stuff like that. So it just made me aware of the reality of what I was dealing with for the rest of my career. And Jalen Rose told me something. So my coach in high school, my coach in college, one of my assistant coaches, Bill Jones and Tony Jones, they coached Jalen Rose in high school. So Jalen Rose would come up to Buffalo all the time. He was his first year with Denver, and he would come to our games. So I knew Jalen Rose pretty well at the time. And he told me, he said, "Kel, man, I'm gonna tell you one thing. You probably want to play after college." He said, "But no matter where you go or what level you play on, remember this: college is fun. When they start paying you, you got to live where they want you to live and do what they want you to do. Whether they're telling you to do something you know is wrong or right, if you want to get your paycheck, you have to be accepting to their rules and their lifestyle." And that advice took me a long way.
One of the things again about that first season over here was obviously we're scoring, but you are an absolute, if you don't mind me saying, a monster on the boards. I mean, I'm looking at the stats of that from that season, and you've had over twice as many rebounds as anybody else on that team that year. and the percentage of offensive rebounds was astonishing. So, and obviously your defense, you could, you could block shots again. And I don't know, keep harping about being undersized, but you're going up. Okay, in the BBL, there weren't huge players, but you're going up against guys still a few inches taller than you, and it was just fantastic because your athleticism, you were dominating. What was your mindset going to these games? Just like, did you focus on the guy you're going up against, or you're like, I've just got to grab every loose ball. I don't want anything, how did you approach these games?
Yeah, my mindset was like you said. I just thought I could grab every. To this day, when I watch basketball, it kind of ticks me off. When I see a guy, the ball is like right by the out of bounds line, and they let it roll out when they could grab it. My mindset was grab everything you can get your hands on. Try to grab it. Even if I knew the other team hit it and it was going to roll out of bounds and we would get the ball back, I want to say I got the ball back for my team. So that was my mindset.
Yeah, the only problem is you have to be really careful because in some of these venues, the wall was pretty close.
Yeah.
But what is it like for you as well? Because you've come over to the UK. Obviously, we speak a similar language as such. Did that help you adjust when you first came over here? Because obviously there are quite a lot of similarities if you are different to the States.
Yeah, that definitely helped me a lot being over in the UK and the language, not having to deal with it. Because like you said, even though the language barrier is not there, there's so many different things and culture shock that you're getting there. That was one thing that was out of the equation. So that helped out a lot, man. And then being in the UK too, there were like a lot of other guys like Ray Schultz was from Philadelphia. And it was guys like from the New York, New Jersey area, that type of stuff, guys that I could mingle with and like I felt more comfortable with. So that helped out a lot. But the not having to deal with a language barrier for my first couple of years while I was still transitioning with my mindset. After when I got older and later in life, when I had the mindset and more opening and more welcoming to different, different ways of life, it was easier. But I think if I would have had to deal with a language barrier my first year, it would have made it much more difficult.
And from the Royals, you then went on to play in South Africa for a while.
Yeah, that was one of my college roommates. Actually, one of my college teammates was going to South Africa, and he was supposed to go with another guy we went to in college, and it didn't work out. So it was like they had a team out there. They want you to come out. Would you like to come? Everybody, even my mother, was like, what are you doing? Why are you going to Africa to play basketball? It makes no sense. This was like 98, 97, 98. But I went to South Africa, and it was one of the best experiences of my life.
I think you spent 2 years there. Is that right?
Yep. We spent about 2 years there, and they had a great league out there. It was only a few teams. I think they had about 8 or 9 teams, but the teams were getting a lot of money from the sponsorship, the telephone companies and stuff like that. We happened to have a great team, great ownership. I'm still in contact with the owners and their daughters and stuff to this day. They treated us like kings, and believe it or not, the basketball level was amazingly. I was shocked when we got out there, and one of my friends, rest in peace, a guy from the Congo, John Ntambwe. After our season, he unfortunately passed away from meningitis. But this guy was one of the best basketball players I ever seen. He was like a LeBron James type of athlete and same size, about the same size as LeBron James, and could do almost everything LeBron. We was in practice, and I'm out there with a guy from Buffalo. And this guy, John, stole the ball from my point guard who came with me from Buffalo. Modi Cox, he actually played in the UK for for a year or two. Quickest guy that I knew. John stole the ball from him, got on a fast break, and did a 360. I looked at Modi. I said, man, I thought we were supposed to be the best guys out here. He opened my eyes. But it was a great league, great experience. And to this day, I would say South Africa is probably one of the best experiences I ever had.
So a lot of Europe around about that time and around the world, when it comes to imports, there would be like a couple of players per team. What was it like in South Africa?
Yeah, South Africa was 2 players per team. It was 2 players per team.
Are they usually American?
Yeah, usually American, and then the African guys. You could get African guys from any African country, but it was like two guys from. It was so fun out there, man. It was a guy from, I think he was from Kentucky, good. He played for a team in Johannesburg. He said he was out there a few years before we got out there. He said, Kelvin, man, only go home when somebody dies. If I don't have to go to a funeral, I don't go back to the U.S. That's how much I love it out here, man. That's how good the experience was out there. But it was, like I said, surprisingly a high level of basketball out there.
And obviously, what's it like living in the country? Obviously, it's another new country for you. What was that experience like?
We were so isolated, because like out there they had us in like we lived in a condo, we had a doorman, so it was like almost like if you went to New York, you got two sides of New York, the ghetto and then the nice areas. So we lived in a very nice section, but you would see the other things that was going around, but none of that stuff directly affected us, So we didn't deal with any like I hadn't seen any type of like racism or anything like that or any. I knew it was there. You could see it around other people, and if you went out at night, you could see the kids on the street, and you could see the level of poverty. But none of that stuff, like the where we lived at and things of that nature, it was, like the world, man. It's like there are two sides to every coin.
Yeah. And what is it like the venues? Were they like old school venues, arenas? I can't picture it. So describe what these sort of places are and how loud or noisy they'd be during a game.
So it depends on similar to like the UK when I first got there. Where we played at was like similar to Hemel. It wasn't a great venue, but it got crazy. Like it was loud. We were in a town called Pietermaritzburg. But if you went to Cape Town or if you went to Johannesburg, then they would have nice stadiums and things of that nature, So just depending on where, what town you were in, what township you were in. So what happened is we would basically play a game at home and then we would either fly to Johannesburg on a weekend. Like it was like every other weekend. So one weekend at home. Most of the time you had to fly to the games. You couldn't like catch a bus to go to the different games in different cities. So that was a good experience too.
And 2 seasons there, how did that come to an end?
At a certain point, they were getting so much money, and this is one of the problems with South Africa at the time, and still to this day, some people will say, they were getting so much money for sponsorships from like the telephone company and like backing, but very little of that money was actually reaching the league and the players. And then the sponsorship pulled out, and they said, if you're not going to do the right thing with the money, we're not going to keep giving you this level of money. And the sponsorship pulled out. They haven't had true professional basketball. It's just starting up like in the last 5 years. And this was like 98. But that's what happened. It was like, and I'm getting this third party from the people, because they would keep telling us every year, no, we're going to get it back. Be ready. We still want y'all to come back because we had a great season. But what I'm getting, the message that I got was the ownership group couldn't come up with a budget to show how they were going to equitably and responsibly use all the sponsorship money instead of lining their pockets and put more into actual basketball into the community. And that's what killed the actual league.
And so it was a sad time then when you had to leave.
I wanted to stay. My plan was to stay out there and to go to school out there, like to live out there year round. That was the plan.
So that comes to an end, and then you return back to the UK, and this time Hemel have moved to Milton Keynes. Well, Bletchley, but they're now the Milton Keynes Lions. Did Vince reach out to you again, or did they approach the agent, or the agent approach them, or how did it come about?
I always stayed in contact with Vince because even my first year after Milton Keynes, like I said, it was the whole journey was a learning experience. After my first year in Hemel, I thought like, man, now I want to make more money. I want to do this. I want to have these visions of grandeur. So I couldn't get what I wanted, so I stayed in the U.S., and then I wound up going to South Africa. But me and Vince, he was always trying to negotiate to get me to come back. We were always trying to work out. And then eventually after South Africa, after the league collapsed, Tom was right, and I worked, Vince, if you got something for me, I will be happy to come back. So that's what happened with that. We had always stayed in contact.
And what was that like coming back? Because obviously the fans remembered you. A lot of the fans obviously moved with the team as such. So what was that like coming back, even though it was just, up the road in terms of venues? What was it like coming back?
It was like a great homecoming, like to be with like a lot of the guys like Leon Knowles, Drew Spinks was still there, seeing a lot of my friends and stuff to come back. So it was a great homecoming. And actually in a short period of time, I think it was a couple years, the league had grown a lot too, and you could see the changes and you could see the growth in UK basketball. So that was a good a good eye opener too. Like you could just see like the way the venues was shifting and the way the league was being received and things of that nature. So to me, it was kind of like a homecoming because that was the first place I started, and it was just great to see the growth.
They've changed venues, but obviously you've got arenas in the league, so you're
Yeah,
playing in arenas. That must be a nice experience for you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Because I always remember that era as like a weird thing, because obviously it felt like the haves and the have-nots. There were loads of arenas, but you still had plenty of the old sports centres, leisure
Yes,
centres.
yeah,
So
yeah.
one week you're playing in a tiny gym, next week you could be playing in, I don't know, a big arena in Manchester.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that was, but it was good. Like I said, it was good to see that growth because when I first started there were more the tiny, sports centers. And then a couple years later, you seen the shift moving towards the arenas. So
So you come back to Milton Keynes. That season you were there. I mean, Milton Keynes didn't have a great history back then, but you did make the playoffs. But also that time, Milton Keynes, and I suppose as well, your previous occasion with Hemel Watford Royals, you got to play some really good players, didn't you?
yep, man, that time was great because I got to play with Tony Winless and Eric Burks, and I had always looked at these guys from my first years there. At the time they were playing for the for the Lions and London Lions, and at the time Tony was playing for the Towers. So I always looked at these guys and looked up to them sort of, and to get a chance to play with them and to become friends with them was a great experience. And I learned a lot from those guys actually.
They helped your career in
Yeah,
terms of.
absolutely. Like this, just small little things there, that they would do, and it was just good experience.
And do you remember much of that season? That said, you did make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, I remember a lot of that season. We would have had a much better season. I don't. A lot of people might not know that our coach, his name was Tom. He was from Chicago, but I forget it. He was an American coach, but his uh his mother got sick, so I don't think a lot of people knew this. He would only come for the most part from the second half of the season. He would just come on the weekends, and he would go back to Chicago during the week. So we didn't really have a coach. Like Vince was filling in, and then we would have to coach on them for the games and stuff. And he was a very good coach. I think we would have played a lot better if we had to coach year round, like for the whole season. But he would literally fly in for a couple of days right before the weekend, give us a practice, and then go back out to be with his sick mother.
So obviously you're training during the week. Who would have taken that then?
Vince did a lot of that training during the week.
And Milton Keynes season ended. Was there an opportunity to return, or did the Tigers come in? What was happening that summer?
That summer, I got an opportunity to go to Portugal.
All
So
right.
I went to Portugal for half a season, and I just didn't like it. It wasn't what I expected. It was a good league and everything, but we were living on an island, a very small island in Portugal. I was in the Azores. So when I got the chance to come back, when
You're well
PJ reached
out,
out to
yeah.
me, yeah, exactly. So when I got the chance to come back, so that's what happened. I got a chance to go to Portugal for a little bit more money, but sometimes it wasn't significant, and sometimes you learn your lesson. Like don't always try to go for a couple extra dollars.
So you then go to Thames Valley. Thames Valley not having a great season. They're making changes. Were you released, or did you leave Portugal first and then go Thames Valley, or did they come in making? How did it come about?
They came in, and my agent at the time came in. It was around Christmas time, and he was like, "I got a chance if you want to go back to UK." And Thames Valley came in with a nice offer. So I was like, yeah, I would like to go back. I'm not really, I'm not loving it here. We were having a good season. Like we had a real good season in Portugal. They hated, they didn't want me to leave at all. And I actually wound up not getting paid my last month after I left. Yeah, we're going to pay you. But long story short, I had a clause in my contract that if something better came up, that I can entertain it, and that's how I was able to get out of it. So.
And then you come to Thames Valley. Now I was looking at the stats. Thames Valley used 18 different players that season, and that included PJ suiting up for a few games.
Yep.
Of course, Paul James had retired a
Uh-huh.
while before. Even Michael Hales
I
played
was
a
going to
few
say the
games.
same thing. Even Mike Hell suited.
Because the thing is, I was a Thames Valley fan, and I look back at all the years, apart from obviously the year they folded, but I look back at that one. That was it's just a troubling season. What was it like for you when you came to Bracknell halfway through the season? Tigers weren't in a great place. What was that experience like for you?
It was very frustrating because we had so much talent on the team. Like we have John McCord was there, Tony Christie was there, and it was just very frustrating because for some reason we just couldn't get it together. It wasn't like to this day, like you said, I can't explain it because you're playing with a guy like John McCord, obviously what he could do, Tony Christie. We had I don't know if you remember this guy. We had like a lot of headaches. Simon Ogalese, who was a good player, but couldn't stay out of trouble. So we had the talent that was coming, and guys were coming and going. So it was a very frustrating season. But once again, the people around the team and stuff like that made it, like the supporters and things like that, they made it bearable and made it fun for us.
I don't know. Supporters weren't great at times that year. I know.
They treated like one thing I could always say, and I think to your point earlier, I played so hard, even if the team weren't doing well, people would appreciate how I played,
Yes.
and they would like invite me to their house for dinner, and things like that just meant a lot. When you're away from home.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I was always a fan of yours back then. It was a troubling season, but I remembered you from your time with MK and with the Royals, and you just gave as soon as you stepped on that floor, regardless of situation, it's just like you gave everything until you came out again, and people just appreciated the hustle. Because I said you've mentioned in fact, you were shorter than some of the guys you were going up against, but you gave no quarter. And sometimes you'd come down either with some rebound and be like, wow, or you went up and you dunked it, or you'd block the shot. And sometimes that's all the fans needed to get back into the game.
Yeah.
Was you to go up there and just say, nope, swat them all away.
Yeah.
Because I remember you did, because I was in journalism around about then. I remember you did an interview with a local paper towards the end of the season. And you said how frustrated you were because the team should have got in the playoffs and they fell. I think I kind of got the table here, but I think it's about 5 games short or something in the end. But you were saying like, we should have done it, but we didn't. But the good thing was, from that point of view, is we saw you back again the following season.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, that season was the following season was much more frustrating than the first season.
Well, the way it ended, or just?
I don't know if you remember that second season. We had Eric Burks, we had Mike Martin, Barry Bowman,
with no knee cartilage.
Yeah.
He used to tell me that I'm playing with no knee cartilage.
But we started that season off excellent. Like we couldn't lose a game. And then it just went downhill from there. We made
you made a run though towards the end of that season, because I remember the chase with Newcastle.
Yep.
Because, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you made that for us was really exciting as fans, was that end of season, because it was like, is it us and Newcastle?
Yeah.
Not that it mattered in the end. But that was the thing. But no, that was a good squad.
Yeah, we started that season off to a point where it was going so well. I'm like, I can't believe how we started that season off with an excellent start, and then somehow, like, just the personalities and stuff, guys on the team didn't get along and things like that, and conflicts with PJ with some of the guys, and that was because it had nothing to do with the talent level. And it was like, from going not to be able to lose, we felt like we never would lose a game. It's like we almost couldn't win a game, and that was so frustrating for me.
Yeah. But because I remember it turning around, like I said, that I distinctly remember that running with Newcastle, because it was hilarious trying to get home court. And then, of course, what happens? They come to Bracknell, don't they, in the playoff game and do the business. Because I'll tell you a story. I was sitting at that playoff game. I sat next to Tony Garbolotto, who was a former Eagles coach. And the most frustrating thing was, but with hindsight, I appreciate it, was he told me every single play the Tigers were running before it happened. It was like a fortune teller. And everything's like they're going to do this. And he predicted every time that Newcastle would either steal the ball or get... And it was
Yep.
just uncanny. I sat next to him during that game, and it was frustrating at times because like I want the Tigers to win, Tony.
Yeah,
But he called it all. But it was a fun season. But yeah, there was that. Should we call it a blip?
yeah,
But it's
exactly.
one of those things. But when you look back overall on your time at Thames Valley, what do you remember? What stands out for you?
The supporters, the supporters meant a lot. The teammates, like Mike Martin, I'm still in contact with Michael Martin. Things like that. It's just and like I said, man, like it was like a family feeling. Like we would win or lose, we had supporters that would say, Kelvin, come over to the house for Sunday dinner, come over to do this. Those type of things are like the things that I took away from my basketball experience. Just meeting people who luckily now through social media I'm still able to stay in contact with a lot easier than it would be before. So those are the things that stand out. Like basketball wise, it's mostly, disappointment of like having opportunity. The Simon Ogalese part, the reason I mentioned this guy was one of the best players I ever seen and then played with. But he had the personality, he couldn't stay out of trouble. And it's like when you coming through and you have guys like this on your team and then he gets kicked out of, not off our team, he got kicked out of the league for stuff that he was doing. And it's like, it's just very frustrating to see how much potential we really had at that time and not to be able to capitalize on it.
And that season was your final season in the British Basketball League, and you get included. But I want to get a stat I found because just for the benefit of the listener, we took a break a few minutes ago and we started up again, and I couldn't believe I found it. So you finished in the BBL in 2002. The BBL started back in 1987. Now, this is from the handbook the year after you left. When you left the BBL, you were 10th all time in block shots.
Mm.
So all those players that come before you, and some have played many, many seasons, you played 4 in the BBL, and you were 10th all time. I mean, obviously you were dropped down
Yep.
since, but at that point, 4 seasons, and you were already 10th in there. If you played a couple more years, I reckon you would have cracked up top 5 easy.
Yeah, I'm sure, man.
But
I had a God-given ability to block shots. To this day, I don't know how I used to do it. It's timing, but it was one of those things like I could do it. Blocking shots was the reason I was able to expand my whole basketball career started off of being able to block shots, and everything else followed. Like I had just a natural talent to do that.
But it's funny because I was talking to some old friends who were Tigers fans, and they all remember different things. Some remember you scoring. I mean, there was even I even remember a post on when I did Instagram. Someone remembered that when you used to reverse dunk the ball, how they excited about that. I don't know how many times you did that, but if you can remember doing it, by all means share it. But I always remembered your commitment to defense, your rebounding, and then someone said, "Oh God, but wasn't he a great block? Wasn't he great at blocking shots?" And suddenly, like, yeah, he wasn't he? And that's what I love because you're going up against guys who are probably 3-4 inches taller than you at least, and you're like, no, get that out of here. And that said, that's why you're. I mean, it's probably the same for a Lions fan, but that's why you're so popular at Tigers was the fact that, like I just said, you gave everything from the moment you stepped on that floor, and people appreciated that hard work and hustle that you gave every single time, regardless whether the team was on a winning streak or losing streak. You always gave that, and always appreciate that. But you get to the point. So after 2002, we're finished. Not talk about that Newcastle playoff game anymore. Was there an opportunity to come back to Tigers again that following season, or were the offers coming in from elsewhere?
So originally, after the season was over and the way that things worked out, PJ wanted to go like kind of start fresh. So we weren't bringing like back a lot of the same guys. He kind of couple of the core players, but long story short, there wasn't an opportunity for me to come back initially.
Right.
So started putting out some fillers, and I hooked on with a team over in Paris. And then once I got there, during the middle of the season, I did have an opportunity to come back to Thames Valley, but at that time we were doing well there, and I decided to stay in France.
Now, for the benefit of the listener, you were playing in NM1, which
Yes.
is the 3rd tier of French basketball. Now, a lot of people were going late 90s, early 2000s, obviously after Bosman, to play in France. And in a lower division, But in most cases, even though it's a lower division, say in France, in a lot of cases, it's a better level than what the BBL was at. Did you find that yourself when you went to France?
Yeah, I definitely found that because just the money was much different in France. Like you got paid a lot more money, which was shocking. Like in the third division, I'm in France, I made more money than I ever made in the BBL, like in the first division. And it was like housing and things like that. It was more because in France, what you don't have in the BBL is like the soccer with the relegation and things of that nature, and then the ascension where teams can move up. So although you in the third, like in the BBL, you finish 15th, you're going to be still in the BBL next year. And in France, so if we were in third division, like NM1, and you win, you got an opportunity to go up to Pro B. So a lot of times for guys like myself, they would pay you more if they felt that you could help the team move up. So, and that's when, my first year when I got there, I was on a team called Bondy, like maybe 30 minutes outside of Paris. And they really weren't expected to do much. They even had in the newspaper before they had us, it was maybe 15 teams in the league or something. They had us rated like 13th, in the preseason. And they said like they got this guy coming from the UK, but the UK's not known for basketball. So, if
I
this is
didn't
their,
even think he was American.
yeah, they was like, but if this is their American import and he played in the UK, before he came here, how good could he be? So long story short, we finished like third in the league that year. And the only reason we didn't finish first is that Christmas time, the ownership told us nobody expected us to be doing so well. They're like, we don't have the money to move up next year. Y'all playing too good for us. You know. So
I've done a podcast a while back in the series. I'm not sure if it was maybe Andy Thompson or something, but a similar situation where just couldn't go up, go up.
Exactly.
But, so that's the third tier. So you're playing with a lot of part-time players at that level, the French guys?
No, believe it or not, and no, that's the same thing I thought. But these guys are professional basketball players. So what happens is you'll probably have a core of 6 professionals.
Yeah.
And then to fill the team out, the rest of the guys are, the bench players are part time. But they rarely get into the game, to be honest with you. Like the horses are going to play. So, but when I first got there, I thought the same thing. Like, I asked this guy, like, you got another job? He was like, no, man, I play this is my job. I can play just like you. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, but
so
no.
How many imports to that level?
So we had one American, and then you would have like one Bosman player or something. So we had another guy from a guy from Lithuania on our team at the time.
So, I just wondered, obviously, high levels it was 2, or post Bosman even more. But so one, you were the sole American. What was that like? Because did you pick up the language? Because you ended up playing in France for a number of years. Did you pick it up?
I picked up the language. It was good. It was a great experience. When I first got there, I was out of shape, like very much out of shape when I first got there, because I signed my contract early, had some money from the UK, and I was just having a good summer. So I was out of shape. I remember after my first game, the only thing that saved me was because in France it's much different too. They cut players a lot quicker than like you do in the UK. So my first game, I had a bad game. Well, I have a bad game. I had a middle of the road game, but as an American, you can't have a middle of the road game. And my owner the coach comes up to me with like, man, what's going on? We won the game. You played, I thought you were going to do better, because they didn't know me at the time. And I was like, man, I could play basketball. Just relax, man. I'm out of shape or whatever. And he was like, I got teams calling me, got agents calling me. They got other players, but we won the game. It saved me because we played one of the good teams and we won the game. And after that, we started rolling and I started playing better. And then one of my proudest moments in sports, a couple months later, we were having a great season. We had a game. We lost the game against a big team. And the coach came up to me. He said, man, if I had 5 guys like you, we would never lose a game. He was like, man, you were everywhere. And it's the same guy that told me a few months later that they were thinking about, earlier they were thinking about replacing me. So those types of things were great.
That's the thing is, like I said, as you said, you're the sole American on that team. It's quite volatile.
Mm-hmm.
You could be gone. So just from a non-basketball point, you're living. Was this in the Paris suburbs or just a bit further out?
In the suburbs,
So as an American living in for a season near Paris, did you actually get a chance to say enjoy Paris, go around, do all the touristy things?
Absolutely, man. We stayed in Paris. Like we didn't have a game. I was literally like a 30-minute train ride from, I had my car, but I was a 30-minute train ride from Champs-Élysées. So I was
Yeah.
on Champs-Élysées and like we hung out all the time with the other Americans and stuff. And it's so many because France, they have basketball. They have the three levels of basketball. Like we had so many teams around the Paris area. Like all these guys from New York. We would just after the games all night. Let's meet at this bar. Let's meet at this place. And so it was guys from back home, and it was a great experience.
And did that experience make you? I mean, obviously you played for some other teams in France, but did that make you want to stay in France at that point, or you didn't know you were just going season by season?
I fell in love with France at that point because just I picked up the language pretty quickly. Like even though I can't speak fluent, like I could understand what they were saying to me to the point where the coach no longer had to translate for me in practice. Like I could understand it, even if I couldn't talk back to him. I knew what they wanted, or I could say a few words here or there. And then from that season, because we played so well and we did so well when nobody expected us to do well, everybody figured this guy can help us move up. Because they would think like if the team's doing well, it's the American. No matter what happens, they think the American is the greatest thing on earth. So I got a lot bigger contracts the next year to say, I got a contract to go down to the fourth division the next year to make more money than I ever made because they wanted to move up.
Yeah.
And we moved up. We lost one game that year. So like those, but I had got a reputation in France that this guy can help teams move up, and that's kind of how I made my name in
Just
France.
for memory, where was this you went to after
This
that?
was in a town called Liévin in the north of France, like but near the Lille border in Belgium.
Right.
Near
Yeah.
yeah,
I know Lille.
right,
Yeah.
right up there. Yeah. So I stayed there for 4 years actually.
4 years.
Yep.
Wow. So you really got to enjoy France. That's
Yeah.
real France, not Paris. Paris is for tourists.
Exactly.
So what was it you liked about playing there? So you helped get them promoted to MN1. Did
Yep.
they stay there the rest of your time in France, or did they
So what happened was
travel down?
the first practice I got there, I called my agent. I said, we moving up. I was like, trust me, there's no way that we don't move up this year. He said, man, just relax. It's your first. I said, these guys on these teams, they would always be right there, but they could never get over the hump. Like they didn't have the mentality. It had nothing to do with the talent.
Yeah.
And then with my personality and my way that I drive people, like I said, we lost one game, and the reason we lost that game, the referees, we were on the road. They just weren't going to let us win that game. They weren't going to let us go undefeated. We had two guys on our team that were just excellent. One guy on our team, he was in a crazy story. He was in the fourth division. His name is Kareem Atana. His son name is Adam Atana. Adam might be in the NBA draft this year, but Kareem became one of my friends. When I first got there, I told my agent, you need to sign this dude, Kareem. He's great. Like he's only played a Liévin. It's only a low level. And I said, Kareem, what are you playing at this level? He had no exposure. I said, you're too good to play at this level. He said, the coach told me that I don't even have the level to play here. I'm lucky to be here. Long story short, after connecting Kareem with my agent, Kareem has a 10-year career. He's the MVP of Pro B probably 3 times. One of the longest standing careers. Like just an excellent career. Now he's a coach at Asvel, and his son is an NBA prospect. But those are the type of guys that was on a Liévin team, but they didn't realize like how good they were. And I was there like, no, man, you got it. Believe in yourself. We can do this. And so we stayed in NN1 for the duration of my career there. And then from there, when I got a little bit older, my coach from that team, my original coach, got a job in the south of France at a place called La Rochelle, so I wound up going and playing in La Rochelle, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever lived.
It's on the West Coast, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I remember I did one with Andy Thompson. I know he definitely played there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, near Bordeaux. It's out there near Bordeaux.
Yeah. See, a great time in France. And going back to your Kareem story, I mean, I hope you took your agent's cut for helping boost your career.
I forgot the story until Kareem retired and he put more of the nice Instagram posts. I remember Kelvin told me about this guy and I wrote him. I said, I forgot about that. You owe me a cut, But I was in Saint-Tropez this summer. He took me out to a nice dinner. So I guess all is well.
So how many years in total then did you end up playing in France after you left Tigers?
7 years in total I played in France.
And then what brought that to an end?
Just getting older, and I couldn't do because my game was so predicated on my athletic ability. Just getting older, and I couldn't. It was hard for me to get up for the practices, like the games and stuff was pretty. But I took like my all of running and jumping and stuff took a real toll on my body, so it was just time to let it go.
And was that an easy decision when the time did come? You're like, I'm okay with it.
It wasn't easy, I knew I had to do it, but it was still mentally, it was like all I knew. Like it was kind of like, what am I going to do with myself? It was very like terrifying. What's the rest of my life look like if I'm not playing basketball? So I've been in Europe now for over 10 years. I'm going back to the States. What am I going to do here? So it wasn't an easy transition, but my agent helped me out with it and, helped me talk me through some things, hooked me up with some people that did it before. So that helped.
There was one question I wanted to ask you before we finish on your playing days, because I forgot to ask. It was the one sock high up I even posted a picture of it. You used to wear that one sock high up on your leg. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so the story behind that was Tony Christie started doing that when I was at the Tigers, and I asked him the same question, "What's the story?" And he said, "Well, I had an aunt that had, I think she had lung cancer, and she passed away, and the lung cancer was on, I think, the right side of her body. So one of the legs he wore up, as a in tribute to his aunt for that side of her body. And I had an uncle that had passed away a couple years ago from lung cancer. So once I heard that story, I joined in with him for the rest of that season. That's why we did that.
Yeah, I just remember on the pictures, and I thought if I speak to you, I had to ask you.
Yeah.
I probably might have remembered it at the time, but it's one of those things that's gone in the past.
Yep.
So, if you don't mind, let's bring you up to date, because obviously there'll be people listening who fondly remember you when you played over here. What's life been like for you since you retired? So, what you're talking about, so about 2009, 2010, would that be
Yep.
right?
Spot on. Yep.
Right. So, what's life been like for you since then?
Since then, I got into banking. So I started off, I was home for probably a couple years, like bouncing around, not knowing what to do with myself, just spending money. And then I found out, like, I fell into banking. So I started off in the bank, like bank manager here in New Jersey and business banking. And then I transitioned that into a role of now I do anti-money laundering investigations for a bank. So I go through, like, work with the FBI and Homeland Security, anything they have funky going on to any accounts. I do that type of stuff. I live with my partner. We have a young baby. My partner is a lawyer, so things worked out well. It took a time. It was a hard transition to, like, kind of come back. The funny thing about sports, or at least for me, when I used to play basketball, I would see guys in suits at the bank and stuff and think they were so professional and say, "Oh man, this guy, like, he has a real job. I'm getting paid just to play a sport." Then I realized all the lessons that I learned from basketball and the responsibilities and things, I ascended in the banking industry much faster than my colleagues who had been in the industry 10 years before me. So the lessons from sports and traveling really paid dividends in my after basketball life.
I took the reverse journey. Before I moved into journalism, I used to work in banking. And then I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
Started working in journalism and sports, and that's been the journey since. But what before we finish, what do you miss about basketball? Because obviously, as you know, when you're a player, you're around guys all the time. You're training, routine stuff like that, traveling. Is there anything about the game you miss?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest part. The camaraderie, being around the guys, traveling. Like, I try to travel as much as I can now. Like, try to go to Europe at least once a year, but it's still not the same when every weekend you're going out to a different town, seeing something new. But I really miss the camaraderie, and I also miss the honesty of a sports, of like a team concept. Like, the coach and the players, you can just say what's on your mind, and it's all for the greater good if you're in the right environment. Like, you and a guy can get into it, and then 2 minutes later you're trying to, like, you're working together for the same goal. In corporate America, you see people doing stuff and you got to just bite your lip, like,
Yeah.
So I missed being able to be honest with somebody and saying, I used to do it when I first got here. I didn't understand. And I try to tell them, I'm like, no, we work for the same company. We're trying to get to the same place. But I didn't realize it wasn't going to be accepted. So that's one of the things I miss is like with sports, you can just really be, if you have the right, goal in your heart to really be a winner and to be a team player, people will accept you once they know that you're doing it for the right purposes. So I miss that. It's hard for me because I'm a very passionate person to see somebody doing something wrong and not being able to directly speak to it. So I miss that type of environment.
It's a shame you can't do block shots in your banking career.
Yeah.
So you've been back in the States now for a good number of years. You've now built your career away from the sport. Just before we finish, look back on your time, obviously in South Africa, in the UK, in France. Is there anything you miss about those times? Like maybe people, the food, the places, anything you fondly remember?
Yeah, I miss the places, like exploring new places, getting a chance to explore new places, like on a much more frequent level. Because like with doing that, you get a chance to taste different foods, meet new people, and just learning about new cultures. That's one of the biggest things that I miss. Here in the U.S., if I jump in a car and go 6 hours, I'm still in the U.S. When I was in Lille and I jumped in the car and I went 6 hours, I went through 4 countries. So that's the type of stuff that I miss, not being able to go.
So you've been in a new country in about 10, 15 minutes, wouldn't you?
Exactly. So I miss that type, being able to go and just experience new countries and different things on a weekend.
Is that sort of thing then when your baby's an adult, you maybe like, or even a teenager, you'd be like, I'm taking you to France, I'm taking you to Bracknell or Milton Keynes.
Absolutely. We actually spent the summer, last August, we went in Saint-Tropez for the whole summer. And my baby was a year old, so that's going to be her life experience.
Hey, that's a good place to spend the summer.
Absolutely, man.
Well, listen, Kelly, after all this time, it's been absolutely fantastic to catch up with you, and it's been really good to look back over your career. Like I said, just speaking purely as a Tigers fan now, we really appreciated the season and a half that you spent with the Tigers, just everything you gave during that time. And I think, like I said, that stat about those, well, I said 4 seasons in the BBL. Of course, you played 3.5. So the fact that you were 10th at the time when you left, again, shows just, how much, you did while you were here. Like I said, whether it's scoring, the blocking or the rebounding, I've said it a few times in this pod, I'll say it one more time. We just appreciate the fact that whenever you stepped on that floor, you gave your all. We really do appreciate that. And like I said, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I really do appreciate that as well.
And I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And also, I listened to some of the podcasts, Tony, Holly, Vince, things of that nature. Just thank you for what you're doing, because it means a lot to the culture and to the sport, and especially talking about, the old BBL days.
That's it. I've said in another podcast, you played in round about my favourite era of the BBL. And I think there's a lot of new fans coming into sport. And I just want to try and share stories from, years past, because there were some great moments. And I think it's good for newer fans to get that education of what the league was like. But also it's great for us long-term fans to reminisce about those days. So thank you so much for your time. And I wish you all the best with your career. And hopefully maybe we'll catch up again one day. Get you back on. You never know.
Same to you. I will look forward to it. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. Cheers.
All right, cheers.
Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please make sure to share the podcast on your socials and tell everyone about it. Before we sign off, here's something for you. In the interview, I mentioned to Kelvin that when he left the UK in 2002, he was 10th all-time in block shots. Well, later on, it made me curious to see just where he ranks now, 2.5 decades later. The answer is 14th, so he only dropped 4 places during that time. I don't know about you, but to only be overhauled by 4 players in 2.5 decades who all played longer here in the UK, it just proves how good he was at blocking shots. Now, anyway, that's all for this episode. Until the next time, my name's Niall Gray. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Eurostep Brit podcast, a Hoops and Hockey production.